Before there was time, before there was space, an ancient voice asked the ultimate question: what was there before the very beginning? I mean, just listen to that line. It comes from a hymn written thousands of years ago, and it completely messes with our ideas of what it means to exist or not exist.
So today, we're going to go on a bit of a mission. We're going to try and decode one of the oldest, most profound texts ever written, the Nasadiya Sukta from the Rigveda. And here's the wild idea we're going to explore. What if this ancient hymn isn't just beautiful poetry? What if it's a kind of cosmological code, asking and maybe even answering the exact same questions that keep today's top physicists up at night?
So here's our game plan. We're going to look at what the Vedas say about the void before creation. Then we'll check out some mind-blowing cosmic calculations. After that, we'll dive into the role of consciousness itself. Then we'll see the universe as a giant loop. And finally, we'll put it all together and try to figure out what this ancient file is really telling us.
All right, first stop, the nothingness that wasn't. Let's travel back in time, way back, before the Big Bang, to see what was going on in the void before, well, everything.
You know how modern cosmology talks about a singularity? It's this point of infinite density where all our laws of physics just break. It's basically a sign on the door that says, beyond this point, we have no idea. But the Rigveda, it described the state as Tamas, darkness wrapped in darkness. And here's the key. It wasn't empty. It was a void brimming with unmanifested potential.
And this is where the Vedic concept of zero, or Shunya, is a total game changer. See, Western thought was often terrified of empty space, a vacuum. But in Vedic philosophy, this void was Purna, which means complete fullness. It wasn't nothingness. It was the womb of all creation, just pregnant with the possibility of everything that was about to be.
Okay, so let's move from these big, abstract ideas and get into some hard numbers. Because this is where things get, well, honestly, a little spooky. So let me just ask you a quick question, just to get us all on the same page. What's the number you have in your head for how old our planet is?
Right? About 4.5 billion years. We figured that out pretty recently, in the 20th century, using all our fancy radiometric dating and modern techniques. It's a huge achievement for science.
Okay, hold that number in your head. Now, let's look at a calculation from the ancient Vedic texts. They had a concept called a day of Brahma, or a Kalpa, one full cycle of the cosmos. And the number they calculated for that cycle? 4.32 billion years. I mean, just look at those two numbers side by side. It is absolutely staggering. On one side, you have our most advanced 20th century technology. On the other, you have a number from an ancient civilization, thousands of years old. How is that possible? It is way too close to just be a lucky guess.
And hey, don't just take my word for it. The one and only Carl Sagan said this himself. He looked at all the world's ancient stories and religions and basically said this is the only one whose sense of time is even in the same ballpark as modern cosmology. That's a huge endorsement.
This brings us to what is, for my money, the most mind-bending part of this whole thing. It's a concept that literally broke physics in the 20th century, but it was a core idea in Vedic thought for thousands of years. The idea that you, the observer, actually help create reality.
Okay, so you might have heard of the double-slit experiment. It's a cornerstone of quantum physics, and it's super weird. Basically, if you shoot tiny particles at a wall with two slits in it and you don't watch them, they act like waves. They go through both slits at once. But the second you try to observe them, to see which slit they go through, bam, they act like little solid balls and pick one path. The very act of looking at reality changes what reality does.
So this idea that blew everyone's minds? Well, for Vedic philosophy, this was just how things work. They always talked about two sides of reality. Prakriti, which is all the stuff, the material universe, and Purusha, which is consciousness, the one who's watching. And to them, you couldn't have one without the other. They were totally inseparable. The universe, in a way, needs a witness to even exist.
And this connection wasn't lost on the guys who invented quantum mechanics. Werner Heisenberg, one of the giants of the field, said flat out that it was only after reading Indian philosophy that these crazy ideas from his own labs started to make sense. It was like he found an instruction manual for reality written thousands of years ago.
Okay, so if the universe pops out of this state of pure potential, and it's shaped by being watched, where does it all go? What's the end game? Well, let's take a look at their grand timeline. We tend to think of time as a straight line, right?
There was a beginning, the Big Bang, and there will be an end, whether it's a big crunch or just fading out. But the Vedic model is completely different. It's a grand, endless cosmic loop. You have Srishti, which is creation. Then Sthiti, the long period of preservation where everything happens. And finally, Pralaya, the great dissolution, where everything folds back into that state of pure potential, ready for the next go-around.
And what's just brilliant about this is that embedded inside this cosmic spiritual idea is a fundamental law of physics, the first law of thermodynamics. You probably remember it from science class. Energy cannot be created or destroyed, only transformed from one form to another. That is precisely what the Vedic cycle describes. A principle we only formalized in the 1800s was a built-in feature of their universe.
So let's just pause and take stock. We've got a state of pure potential before the universe began, a cosmic timeline that's jaw-droppingly accurate, a reality that depends on an observer, and a universe built on the conservation of energy. So, with all that in mind, what are we really looking at when we read the Nasadiya Sukta?
And this leads us to the heart of the matter. What if we've been misreading this text for centuries? We call it a hymn, we call it poetry, but what if it isn't? What if it's something far more technical? What if it's code?
Think of it like a deeply coded record, a data file, but instead of zeros and ones, it uses rich, metaphorical language to lay out the energetic origins of our universe. It details the pre-cosmic state, it gets the timeline right, it integrates consciousness and matter, and it's all built on a framework of recycling energy. It's all there.
Which leaves us with this pretty profound and honestly pretty humbling question. As we push the absolute limits of science with our particle accelerators and deep space telescopes, are we really pioneering new frontiers? Or are we just, finally, catching up to an understanding that ancient sages, the Rishis, had thousands of years ago?
Perhaps the whole way we look at this needs to shift. Maybe this isn't about rewriting history books to give ancient cultures some scientific credit. Maybe it's about realizing that we've had access to the universe's source code all along, and we're only now developing the language and the tools to finally read it. We're not rewriting history. We are just now beginning to decode the original file.